The space station Concordia floated in the dark like a silver scar against the black. It was ancient, older than either species that now met beneath its cold metal bones. Once, it had belonged to a civilization long gone, a people who had built wonders and vanished before humanity learned to walk upright. Concordia was their gift and their ghost, a relic that refused to die. Dr. Elias Vance watched it grow larger through the viewport of the shuttle. It spun slowly, lights winking against the abyss, a solitary island between the stars. To anyone else, it might have looked peaceful. To Elias, it felt like a loaded gun, silent, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. "This is it," said the pilot beside him. "Neutral ground, if you believe in that sort of thing." Elias didn't. Neutral ground didn't exist, not out here. He adjusted the collar of his dark diplomat's coat, hiding the old burn scars that crawled up his neck. 3 years had passed since the war began, but the scars never stopped itching. They were a reminder of New Brisbane, of the colony that burned, of his daughter's last message before the signal went dark. "I'm scared, Dad. Please come home." He had never made it home. The shuttle drifted closer, and Concordia's docking arms extended like skeletal fingers. Elias forced his hands to stay steady on the armrests. A deep breath, a slow exhale. He wasn't here as a soldier anymore. He was here to stop a war, or, if that failed, to start one on humanity's terms. A soft chime signaled final approach. The pilot turned to him. "Docking in 60 seconds, Doctor. Anything you want to say before history gets written?" Elias looked out at the endless dark. "History's already written," he murmured. "We're just here to see who survives it." The docking clamps locked into place with a heavy clunk. The airlock hissed open, and cold station air rolled in thin, metallic, and faintly sweet, like recycled oxygen that had passed through 1,000 lungs before. Elias stepped into the corridor. 2 human aides followed, their faces young and pale under the harsh lights. They carried data pads, sealed cases, the nervous weight of people who knew they were walking into a lion's den. A third figure was waiting by the airlock, not human. Taller than Elias by a full head, her frame was wrapped in a robe of deep blue fabric that shimmered like oil. Turanesh, Vexari scientist and liaison, inclined her head with the grace of a predator at rest. Her scales were a soft green that caught the light like polished stone, and her golden eyes blinked slowly, twice, the way her species showed respect. "Dr. Vance," she said in careful English, "welcome to Concordia. On behalf of the Dominion Council, I extend the courtesy of safe passage." "Courtesy," Elias echoed. "That's a word I don't often hear from your people." A ripple of amusement crossed Tira's face. "Then perhaps it is time you did." They walked together through the corridor. The station's interior was ancient and strange, walls covered in faded glyphs, corridors built for beings taller and thinner than either human or Vexari. Lights pulsed in slow rhythms along the ceiling, like the heartbeat of some sleeping giant. "I have read your files," Tira said as they walked. "You were an engineer before the war." "Combat engineer," Elias corrected. "I built things designed to kill other things." "And now you build peace." "Peace is harder," he said quietly. "It breaks more easily." Tira glanced at him sidelong. "Then I hope you have brought strong tools." They reached the central chamber, the Grand Hall of Concordia. It was vast and circular, with high arching ceilings and a floor of polished black stone that reflected the stars beyond the panoramic windows. At the far end stood a raised dais, and on it, the reason Elias' heart had been pounding since they left Earth. "High Warlord Zathrek." The Vexari commander was enormous even for his kind, his scales a deep iron gray, his presence like a thundercloud before a storm. Jagged scars crisscrossed his face, trophies from 100 battles. His armor was ceremonial but unmistakably functional, studded with the symbols of worlds conquered. When his gaze met Elias, it was like being measured by a predator deciding if the prey was worth the chase. "Humans," Zathrek rumbled, his voice deep and cold. "Late, as always." The translator, clipped to his chest, spat out the words with mechanical precision, but the contempt needed no translation. "We came as fast as we could," Elias replied evenly. "The journey from Earth is long." "Everything is long for humans," Zathrek said. "Your ships, your thoughts, your reach, all slow." The Vexari gathered behind him hissed with laughter. Elias forced his jaw to stay relaxed. Anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Perhaps," he said calmly, but we do get where we're going. Zathrek leaned forward on his throne. We will see. The room filled with tension. Somewhere in the shadows above, drones recorded every word and movement, feeding them back to both governments. Billions were watching. One wrong phrase could mean annihilation. Ilias stepped forward and bowed, deep enough to be respectful, shallow enough to show defiance. We are ready to discuss terms. Zathrek smiled, a cold, reptilian expression. Good, because we are ready to give them. The meeting lasted hours. The Dominion's demands were as brutal as expected: unconditional surrender, complete disarmament, territorial concessions. Every point was a knife. Ilias countered each one with patience, with questions, with delays. It wasn't about winning, it was about time. Time for the fleets hidden beyond the reach of Vexari sensors. Time for Project Ashfall, humanity's final gamble, to be ready. But patience wore thin. As the last terms were read aloud, Zathrek's tone sharpened. You misunderstand, human. This is not negotiation. It is mercy. You accept or we take. Then give me time to consult with my government, Ilias said. Even a surrender must be approved. Your government, Zathrek growled, has no power here. Maybe not, Ilias said, holding the alien's gaze, but our people do, and they deserve to know the cost. The warlord stared at him for a long, cold moment. Then he waved a clawed hand. 48 hours, bring me your answer. After that, Earth burns. Ilias bowed again and turned to leave, his aides following in silence. The walk back through the station felt longer, heavier. Every step was a reminder of the stakes. Your people will never accept those terms, Tira said beside him. No, Ilias agreed, they won't. Then war is inevitable. War was always inevitable, he said. The question is whether we choose the battlefield. Hours later, Ilias stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the void. Concordia spun slowly below him, its lights like fireflies against the dark. Somewhere beyond the glare of a nearby star, ships waited. His ships, hidden in plasma storms and sensor shadows. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of humiliation and retreat, all for this moment. The door chimed. Tira entered, her usual calm replaced by unease. There's something you should see, she said. A transmission from my people's intelligence division. A holomap appeared above the table, the Concordia system, marked with dozens of red points. What am I looking at? Ilias asked. Surveillance data, Tira said. It shows increased activity around the star, sensor ghosts, thermal spikes. She met his eyes. They think your fleet is here. Ilias' heart skipped a beat. Do they know? Not yet, but they're watching. He stared at the glowing map. If the Dominion discovered the Ashfall Armada before it was ready, everything would collapse. Humanity would be slaughtered before they ever had a chance. Can you bury this? He asked. Make the readings look like solar interference. I can try, Tira said, but if they deploy scouts. The station shook. The lights flickered. A deep, booming roar echoed through the walls. Alarms screamed to life, bathing the corridors in red. What was that? Ilias shouted. A voice crackled over the comm system. Explosion on Deck 12, hull breach, we're venting atmosphere. Ilias grabbed his coat and ran. Tira followed close behind. Smoke curled through the corridor. Vexari soldiers stormed past, weapons drawn. Human security teams pushed against them, shouting accusations. This was a trap, one Vexari officer snarled. Lies, a human guard yelled back. You did this. Stand down, Ilias roared, but no one listened. The fragile peace dissolved into chaos around him. At the blast site, the walls were scorched black. Metal twisted and melted. Emergency crews sealed the breach as air hissed into the void. A faint chemical smell hung in the air, bitter, acrid, unfamiliar. Tira knelt by a piece of debris, her claws tracing the markings. This isn't Dominion tech, she said slowly. It's not ours either, Ilias replied. Then the truth hit him like a cold knife. Someone wanted this piece to die. Far above them, beyond the station's reach, a coded transmission left Concordia, silent and invisible, aimed at the heart of the Vexari fleet. Message received. Phase 1 complete. Prepare for escalation. And somewhere in the darkness, a war that had never truly ended stirred awake. A mysterious explosion threatens the fragile peace, and someone, perhaps from humanity's own side, wants the war to continue. The alarm screamed on, a shrill mechanical howl that rattled through the bones of the station. Red lights pulsed in the corridor like a heartbeat gone wrong. Vexari soldiers shouted orders in their hissing language, while human security teams scrambled to set up defensive lines. The two sides had stood shoulder to shoulder only hours ago. Now they were glaring at each other over rifle barrels. Dr. Elias Vance stood in the middle of it all, trying to keep his breathing steady. The explosion had been small compared to a military strike, but on a neutral station like Concordia, any violence could be enough to end the negotiations before they truly began. "Seal the bulkheads," shouted Lieutenant Graves, head of the Human Security Detachment, "and I want radiation sweeps on every deck." Across the bay, a Vexari commander barked similar orders in his own tongue, and emergency shutters slammed down along the hallways. Somewhere, deeper in the station, a hull breach was venting air into space. "Dr. Vance," Turanesh's voice cut through the noise. She was crouched by a charred piece of metal from the blast site, golden eyes scanning its surface. "This was no reactor malfunction, look." Elias knelt beside her. The shard was jagged and half-melted, but a faint serial code still glowed on its underside. A manufacturer's mark burned into the alloy. His blood ran cold. "That's human," he said. Tira tilted her head. "Are you certain?" "I spent 10 years in the Space Corps Engineering Division," Elias murmured. "I know our alloys. That was a shaped charge, directional, small yield. Someone built this to breach the hull." Tira looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "Then one of your people planted it. Or someone wants you to think that." The tension in the station reached a breaking point within the hour. The Dominion delegation demanded a full investigation, one led by them. Earth's representatives refused, citing sovereignty and neutrality. Concordia's ancient systems were ill-equipped for this kind of crisis, and without a single government controlling the station, authority fractured. In the Grand Hall, arguments erupted like gunfire. "You bring weapons to a peace summit," thundered High Warlord Zathrek. "This is proof humanity speaks of peace while plotting betrayal." "Ridiculous," Elias countered. "We lost people too. Whoever did this wants us at each other's throats." Zathrek's slitted eyes glinted with anger. "Then explain your alloy, explain your signature on the device." Elias didn't blink. "I will once we've investigated together. Until then, you're guessing. And if you act on guesses, you'll start a war neither of us can stop." The warlord hissed, sharp teeth flashing. "A war we would finish." Before Elias could reply, a Dominion officer rushed in, saluting sharply. "High Warlord, emergency transmission. Sector Gamma patrols report multiple human vessels moving near the neutral zone. Armed." The room erupted into chaos. "They're scouting for another strike," shouted one Vexari commander. "They're patrol ships responding to the explosion," shouted a human diplomat. Zathrek's claws flexed on the armrest. "Withdraw them, or we will treat them as a hostile fleet." Elias felt the trap tightening around him. The patrol group was legitimate, a defensive screen, nothing more, but in this feverish atmosphere, truth no longer mattered. All it would take was one jumpy captain, one wrong move, and 3 years of careful deception would collapse. "Give me a few hours," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "I'll contact Fleet Command and pull them back, but you need to keep your ships at bay too." Zathrek's grin was slow and cruel. "We will see." Later, in the privacy of his quarters, Elias opened a secure channel. The tiny comm unit hummed, encrypting the signal across layers of quantum relay. After a few seconds, the screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Catherine Okonkwo aboard the flagship Vengeful Spirit. "Report," she said without preamble. "There's been a detonation on Concordia," Elias said. "Localized but deliberate. Vexari think we did it." "Did we?" "No, but," he hesitated. "The explosive was human-made and not standard issue." Okonkwo's eyes hardened. "Meaning?" "Meaning it might have come from a rogue faction, someone who wants peace to fail." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "We always knew there were hardliners on both sides. I'll run a background sweep of all personnel attached to this mission." "Do it quietly," Elias warned. "If Zathrek suspects internal division, he'll use it against us." Okonkwo leaned forward, "And the negotiations?" "Fracturing fast. Zathrek's itching for an excuse to attack. He's massing ships near the border. The Admiral's jaw tightened. We can't show our hand yet. The Armada isn't in position. You need to stall them, Elias. I'm trying, he said, but if someone on our side is pulling strings. We deal with that when the time comes, Okonkwo interrupted. For now, your mission is unchanged. Keep them talking. 48 hours, that's all we need. The transmission cut. Elias stared at the empty screen for a long time. 48 hours, that was the window. If the Ashfall Armada wasn't ready by then, humanity's last chance would burn before it even began. Tira found him a few hours later in the observation deck. Below, Concordia rotated slowly, its panels catching the dim light of a distant sun. You look tired, she said. I haven't slept in 3 days. You should, Tira said softly. Humans make poor decisions when they are exhausted. Sleep isn't the problem, Elias murmured. Betrayal is. She was silent for a moment. Then, I ran a spectral scan on the explosive residue. The detonator was military-grade, restricted even among your fleets. He turned sharply. You're saying it was one of ours. I'm saying, Tira corrected, it wasn't a civilian. Whoever planted it had access, authority. Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. Then we've been compromised. Tira's golden eyes softened. And yet you stay. Because walking away means war, he said. And war means extinction, maybe for both of us. You think we would fall so easily? He met her gaze. Not easily, but you'd bleed. And so would we, and when it's over, there won't be much left worth saving. Tira said nothing, but in her silence, Elias heard something unexpected, agreement. The breakthrough came late that night. Lieutenant Graves burst into Elias' quarters without knocking, a datapad clutched in one hand. Sir, we found something. Show me. Security footage minutes before the blast. He pulled up the recording. Grainy, distorted by smoke, but clear enough. A figure in a standard Earth diplomatic uniform placing a maintenance panel back into position, the same panel that later exploded. Elias froze the frame and zoomed in on the face. His stomach dropped. It was Commander Ian Wolfe, Earth Fleet Intelligence. A man Elias had known for years. A man assigned to the mission as liaison to the diplomatic corps. What the hell, he whispered. Graves' jaw was tight. He boarded a shuttle right after the explosion. Destination unknown. We think he's still on the station. Get me his file, Elias said. Everything, postings, contacts, political ties. Sir, Graves hesitated. If this gets out. It won't, Elias snapped. Not until I know why. As the lieutenant left, Elias sank into a chair, mind racing. Wolfe was no rogue. He was connected, respected, and fiercely anti-Vexari. If he'd planted the charge, it wasn't out of greed or madness. It was ideology. There were factions on Earth that wanted total war, who believed humanity should strike now, while the Ashfall Armada was ready rather than negotiate. If Wolfe was one of them, this explosion wasn't sabotage. It was a trigger. And if he succeeded, billions would die. The next morning, the Dominion delegation called for an emergency vote. Zathrek was done talking. He wanted the talks suspended and hostilities resumed. Elias stood at the podium, staring at the rows of alien faces before him. If you walk away now, he said, we all walk into a war we might not survive. You brought the war here, Zathrek roared. You detonated a bomb on neutral ground. And I'm telling you, Elias said, voice rising, someone wants this peace to fail, don't give them what they want. The warlord's eyes narrowed. You have 1 hour, identify the culprit, or we end this. Tira met Elias' eyes from across the chamber. It wasn't much time, but it was something. Elias found Wolfe in the maintenance ring, trying to leave through a service hatch. The man froze when he saw him. Dr. Wolfe said too casually, I was just... Spare me, Elias growled. I saw the footage. For a long moment, Wolfe said nothing. Then he sighed. I suppose there's no point lying. Why, Elias demanded. 48 hours, that's all we needed. Exactly, Wolfe said. And then what? We sit down and hand them our future. You think peace is possible with monsters like them. They murdered civilians, Elias said. But you just tried to start a war that would kill millions more. They're going to attack anyway, Wolfe hissed. At least this way we strike first, we take the initiative. You're a fool, Elia said. You think strength is the only language they understand, but strength without control is suicide. Wolf's hand drifted toward the sidearm on his belt. Elias saw it coming and stepped forward before the weapon cleared its holster. The two men crashed into the bulkhead, grappling. Wolf was stronger, but Elias had rage on his side, rage and purpose. He slammed the man's arm against the wall until the gun clattered away. You're under arrest, Elias panted, for sabotage, attempted murder, and treason. Wolf laughed bitterly. You think you're saving humanity, you're just delaying the inevitable. Maybe, Elias said, locking the restraints around his wrists. But sometimes, delaying the inevitable is how you win. 1 hour later, Elias dragged Wolf into the grand hall in front of both delegations. The revelation stunned the room into silence. Even Zathrek seemed momentarily thrown. He acted without orders, Elias said. A fanatic, nothing more. He will stand trial under Earth law. But this proves what I've been saying, someone wants this piece to fail. Zathrek studied him for a long moment. And what if that someone is right? Then let history judge, Elias said, but not today. The warlord turned away, his expression unreadable. 48 hours remain, he said finally. Make them count. As the Vexari delegation filed out, Tira approached. You stopped a war today. No, Elias said quietly, watching the stars beyond the window. I just postponed it. And far away, beyond the orbit of a dying sun, something vast shifted in the dark. A fleet of ships, silent and waiting, ready to change the fate of two civilizations. Elias uncovers a human traitor responsible for the explosion. But the damage is done, and the countdown to war continues. The cell was cold and empty, a bare room of metal and silence. Commander Ian Wolf sat in the center, his hands bound, his eyes burning with a calm, dangerous certainty. Dr. Elias Vance stood on the other side of the transparent barrier, watching the man who had almost ended the fragile chance for peace. They had known each other once, colleagues, even friends. Wolf had been a field officer when Elias was still designing forward bases on the outer colonies. They'd shared whiskey and war stories. Now they shared nothing. You should have left me in the maintenance bay, Wolf said. His voice was steady, like a man convinced of his righteousness. You don't have the stomach for what's coming. Tell me why, Elias said. Tell me what this was all for. Wolf's lip curled into a bitter smile. Because you're wrong, Elias. All of you, the diplomats, the politicians, the cowards hiding behind words. Peace with the Vexari isn't possible. It never was. You planted a bomb on a neutral station, Elias snapped. You nearly triggered a massacre. And I'd do it again, Wolf said without hesitation. We should hit them now before they finish regrouping. You've seen the reports, their shipyards are accelerating production. Every day we wait, they get stronger. Every hour you waste talking, they prepare to kill us. Elias' jaw tightened. So your solution is to start the slaughter early. My solution, Wolf said, leaning forward, is to make sure we're the ones who survive. There was no anger in his tone, no madness, just cold logic, and that scared Elias more than rage ever could. You're not the only one who thinks this way, Wolf continued. Half the fleet command agrees with me, they just don't have the courage to act. Half the fleet, Elias repeated quietly, or just a handful of fanatics. Call us what you want, in the end you'll see I was right. Elias turned away. You're not a soldier anymore, you're a saboteur, and when this is over you'll face trial for treason. Wolf chuckled. If this ever ends, Elias, if. Hours later, the council chamber was silent except for the hum of hidden cameras and the soft tapping of Turanesh's claws against the table. She had listened to the interrogation feed with quiet focus. He believes what he says, she murmured. Yes, Elias said, and that makes him dangerous. Tira's golden eyes narrowed. Are there more like him? There's always more, Elias said. But I think Wolf was acting alone here. If there's a larger conspiracy, it's back on Earth. And if they try again, then this ends before we even start. They stood together, watching the starfield beyond the chamber windows. Concordia spun silently against the void. The galaxy itself seemed to be holding its breath. I have news, Tira said after a moment. Something from the Dominion's intelligence wing. It's not public. What is it? She hesitated, then activated a projection from her wristband. A tactical map appeared, displaying fleet movements and deployment patterns. Elias felt his pulse spike. He whispered, these are mobilization orders. Tira nodded. High Warlord Zathrek has requested a full battle group. They're preparing for a jump destination Earth. How soon? 48 hours, maybe less. Elias gripped the edge of the table. It was worse than he feared. The Dominion wasn't just bluffing, they were preparing a preemptive strike. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. Because I don't want to see my people die, Tira said, and I don't want to see yours die either. Then help me stop this. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes. Do you truly believe peace is still possible? Elias thought of Wolf, of the bomb, of the hatred boiling beneath every diplomatic smile. I don't know, he admitted, but I know war is worse. They met in secret in one of Concordia's forgotten maintenance chambers, a place so old that even the Vexari avoided it. Tira brought encrypted Dominion data. Elias brought a secure uplink to Earth's fleet intelligence. Zathrek's fleet is here, Tira explained, pointing to the holographic map. If they jump now, they can reach Earth orbit in 3 days. And we'd never stop them in time, Elias muttered. We don't have the numbers yet. Ashfall isn't ready. The plan, Earth's last desperate gamble, had always been simple. Pretend to be weak, lure the Dominion into complacency, then strike with overwhelming force. But the timing was crucial. If the Vexari moved too early, humanity would be caught unprepared. Unless, Tira, Elias said slowly, what if we leak this? Her crest flattened in confusion. Leak. To the Dominion Council, not the military, the civilian leadership. She frowned. You would expose their plans to their own government. Zathrek wants this war, Elias said. But not everyone does. If we can sow doubt, if we can split their chain of command, we might delay the strike. Tira hesitated. It's a dangerous move if they discover the leak came from me. They won't, Elias said. I'll take the blame. She stared at him for a long time. You would risk your life for this. My life stopped mattering the day New Brisbane burned. Silence stretched between them, then Tira nodded. I'll prepare the data. The next 24 hours were a blur. Rumors of the planned invasion spread quietly through Dominion political circles. Questions were raised in the Senate. Orders were delayed. Supply convoys were halted for review. The invasion clock began to slip. But Zathrek was not fooled. When the summons came, Elias knew it was coming. He was escorted to the Grand Hall by 2 heavily armed Vexari soldiers. The warlord waited for him there, his scaled face carved into a mask of fury. You, Zathrek hissed, you've been speaking to my enemies. I've been speaking to anyone who still listens to reason, Elias replied calmly. You leaked classified information, the warlord snarled. That is an act of war. And planning an unprovoked invasion is. Zathrek stepped closer until Elias could feel the heat radiating from his armored frame. I could have you executed right now. Then you'd prove me right, Elias said evenly, and give every moderate in your government the proof they need to depose you. For a moment Zathrek's claws twitched, then he laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You're clever, human, I'll give you that, but cleverness will not save you. Maybe not, Elias said, but it might save my people. The warlord leaned down, his breath hot and bitter. You have bought yourselves time, nothing more. Time, Elias said, is all I need. Hours later, the cost of that time came due. Turanesh was arrested in her lab. Dominion security dragged her through the halls in chains, her protestations ignored. Word spread fast, Tira the traitor, Tira the spy, Tira the human sympathizer. By the time Elias heard, she was already in a detention cell and scheduled for execution at dawn. She's being made an example, Graves said grimly. They're blaming the leak on her. Elias' hands clenched into fists. She saved us, and now they're going to kill her for it. Then we get her out, Graves said. But it won't be easy, security's doubled, Dominion troops are everywhere. Elias stared out at the stars. His mind was already racing, pieces falling into place. He had planned for this, contingencies, escape routes, blind spots in Concordia's ancient systems. He had always planned for this. Contact the Marines, he said quietly. The ones still on the station, tell them to gear up. Sir, Graves asked, you're planning. A rescue, Elias said. We're getting her out before sunrise. The plan was reckless, desperate, but it was the only choice. Under cover of a staged power failure, Elias and a small strike team slipped through the forgotten maintenance shafts that laced Concordia's old structure. They moved fast and silent, weapons ready but fingers off the triggers. The Vexari patrols were heavy but predictable. At 3:47 hours, they reached the detention level. Two guards stood watch outside Tira's cell. They didn't see the stun charges roll across the floor until it was too late. The silent flashes dropped them instantly. Elias keyed the door. "Tira," he whispered. She looked up from the cell bench, shock and disbelief in her golden eyes. "You're insane." "Probably," he said, pulling her to her feet. "Come on." They raced through the corridors, alarms beginning to wail. The station shuddered as bulkheads sealed behind them. Dominion soldiers closed in from every direction. "This way," Graves shouted, leading them into a maintenance tunnel. But as they rounded the final corner toward the docking bay, a familiar voice echoed from the shadows. "You didn't really think you could escape me, did you?" Zathrak stepped forward, flanked by a squad of armored warriors. His smile was slow and cruel. "Run and I fire on every human ship in this system," he said. "Surrender now, and I might let your people live long enough to regret this mistake." Elias raised his hand slowly. His pulse thundered in his ears. This was the line, the razor's edge between survival and annihilation. "Your move, human," Zathrak hissed. Elias exhaled. "Fine," he said. "Here's mine." He tapped the comm on his wrist. A distant rumble shook the station, not from within, but from beyond. Sensors screamed as 12 human warships decloaked from behind the system's star, weapons hot and targeting Concordia. The Dominion troops froze. Zathrak's eyes widened. "What have you done?" he snarled. Elias smiled coldly. "I just evened the odds." Elias rescues Tira, but in doing so, he exposes humanity's hidden fleet. The illusion of weakness is broken, and the galaxy is about to change forever. The station trembled, as if the void itself were roaring. A heartbeat ago, Concordia had been a neutral place, a relic of an ancient civilization, home to careful diplomacy and whispered betrayals. Now it was a battlefield waiting to happen. 12 massive warships, humanity's hidden dreadnoughts, floated just beyond weapons range, their dark hulls gleaming like obsidian against the star's light. Each was a city of steel and power. Each carried weapons that could burn worlds. Each was a message: humanity is not prey. High Warlord Zathrak stared at the tactical display, his scaled fists clenching as alarms screamed. His soldiers looked to him for orders, but he said nothing. The Predator had just realized he was not the only hunter in the room. "What have you done?" he hissed again, turning his furious gaze on Elias Wolf. "I told you," Elias said calmly. "I just evened the odds." "You've broken the treaty." "There is no treaty," Elias snapped. "You broke it when you prepared to invade Earth." The two stood face to face in the corridor, the wreckage of diplomacy lying in pieces around them. Behind Elias, the small strike team tightened their grips on their rifles. Behind Zathrak, dozens of Vexari soldiers raised their plasma carbines. The air was electric. One twitch, one mistake, and blood would paint the walls. But it was Zathrak who spoke first. "If you fire, we will destroy you." "Then you'll die trying," Elias said, "and you know it." The tense standoff stretched on for endless seconds. Then a voice crackled in Elias' earpiece, Admiral Catherine Okonkwo herself, speaking from the bridge of the HDF Resolute. "Ambassador Wolf," she said, her voice calm but hard as iron. "We have full weapons lock on the station. Say the word and Concordia is a memory." Elias kept his expression neutral. "Not yet, Admiral. Let's give them a chance." Zathrak's jaw flexed, his yellow eyes darting to the display screens showing the dreadnoughts in perfect formation. "This is impossible," he muttered. "We tracked your production, we destroyed your shipyards." "You tracked what we wanted you to see," Elias replied. "The real shipyards were hidden, deep space, dark zones, asteroid shadows, you never even looked." The warlord's claws scraped against the metal floor. He was no fool, he knew a lost position when he saw one. And right now, Concordia was a trap closing around his neck. "You think this changes anything?" Zathrak growled. "We still outnumber you across the galaxy." Elias took a step closer, his voice lowering. "Maybe, but right now in this system I have enough firepower to erase you, and if you make me, I will." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Then, finally, Zathrek stepped back and barked an order in his native tongue. His troops lowered their weapons. Elias nodded to his own team, and they did the same. The battle, for now, was avoided. They moved quickly. Within the hour, Elias, Tira, and the strike team were back aboard the human embassy cruiser Ardent Dawn, pulling away from Concordia's docking bay. The dreadnoughts held position in silent formation, their presence alone enough to freeze any Dominion response. In the command deck, Tira stared at the tactical map with wide eyes. "I thought the Ghost Fleet was a myth," she whispered. "It was supposed to be," Elias said. "A story, a rumor, a lie we told to keep hope alive. And now it's real. Now it's real." She turned to look at him, her crest shifting in an unfamiliar pattern, something between awe and fear. "Do you understand what this means? The Dominion will never forgive this. They will see it as an act of war." "They already did," Elias replied. "I just made sure we're ready for it." On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Okonkwo stood like a statue, her eyes fixed on the starfield beyond the viewport. Around her, the crew moved with quiet precision, scanning, monitoring, preparing. "Fleet status?" she asked. "All ships reporting green, Admiral," replied Commander Park. "Shields charged, railguns hot, quantum comms stable, we're ready." "Good," she paused, then spoke louder. "Transmit a message to Dominion Command, all frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Ready." Okonkwo stepped forward and clasped her hands behind her back. "This is Admiral Catherine Okonkwo of the Human Defense Force. We are not here to attack. We are not here to conquer. We are here to ensure the safety of our people." Her voice was calm, measured, but it carried like thunder. 3 years ago, you massacred 40,000 civilians on New Brisbane. You called us weak. You said we were prey. You were wrong. This fleet is proof of that. If you wish to continue down the path of war, we will meet you there. But if you wish for peace, real peace, then meet us as equals. The message was sent. All they could do now was wait. That night, if one could call it night on a station that never saw a sunrise, Elias found Tira on the observation deck. She was standing by the glass, staring out at the dreadnoughts drifting like titans in the void. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said quietly. "They're terrifying," she replied. "They shouldn't exist, not in those numbers, not with that firepower." "They exist because of you," Elias said. "Because of New Brisbane, because of every world that burned." Tira lowered her gaze. "We thought you were broken." "You taught us how to bend," Elias said, "and bending doesn't mean breaking." She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you still believe peace is possible?" "I believe peace is worth fighting for," he said, "even if we have to fight to get there." 2 days later, the Dominion responded. A transmission arrived from the Imperial Palace itself, not from a military commander, but from Empress Shalak, ruler of the Vexari Dominion. The message was short and direct. "Human fleet presence is acknowledged. Cease movement beyond Concordia. A delegation will arrive in 3 days to discuss terms. Any aggressive action before then will be considered an act of war." Okonkwo read the message twice before handing it to Elias. "They're scared." "They're pretending they're not," Elias said, "but yes, they are." "Then this is our moment," Okonkwo said. "We press now, force their hand, or we hold position and negotiate from strength." Elias hesitated. The choice was brutal. If they pushed too hard, they risked full-scale war before the fleet was fully ready. But if they held back, the Dominion might regroup and counterstrike. "Hold," he said finally. "Let them come to us." Okonkwo nodded. "Then we wait." The waiting did not last long. 3 days later, a Vexari flagship emerged from quantum space. It was a massive vessel, shaped like a blade and covered in thousands of shifting scale plates. It was not a warship. It was a throne room with engines. And on board was Empress Shalak herself. Her arrival was unprecedented. No Vexari monarch had ever left the homeworld during a conflict. That she did now meant one thing: she understood the stakes. The meeting was set on Concordia, under the ancient hall's vaulted ceiling. No banners, no pomp, just 2 delegations, one human, one Vexari, and the future of 2 species hanging in the air. Shalak was smaller than Elias expected, her scales pale with age. But her eyes were sharp, alive with intelligence and calculation. "You played us well," she said without preamble. We believed you were broken. We believed you were weak. That was the point, Elias replied. You saw what you wanted to see. It was a dangerous gamble. It was survival. Shalek studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, a small, humorless curl of her lips. And now you believe you have the advantage. I know we do. Then why haven't you used it? Elias met her gaze steadily. Because we don't want genocide, we don't want another New Brisbane, we want peace, but peace must come with justice. The room was silent, every word hung heavy with history. Finally, Shalek inclined her head. Then speak your terms. They were simple, brutal, non-negotiable. The Dominion would withdraw from all human systems. They would pay reparations for the worlds they destroyed. They would return all prisoners. And they would turn over those responsible for war crimes, including High Warlord Zathrak. The last demand sparked outrage among the Vexari delegation. Voices rose, fists slammed tables, but Elias did not yield. New Brisbane was not a battlefield, he said. It was a colony, 40,000 civilians. They tried to surrender. You slaughtered them anyway. That is a crime, and there must be consequences. Shalek's eyes narrowed. You ask for blood. No, Elias said. We ask for justice. The room fell into silence once more. At last, Shalek spoke. I will consider your demands. Do more than consider, Elias said softly, because if you don't, we will. Outside, the galaxy waited. Human ships hung in silent formation, their weapons ready. Dominion fleets scrambled to redeploy, their admirals furious and afraid. And in the shadows of distant stars, other species watched and learned. Humanity, once dismissed as prey, was rewriting the rules. But victory was far from certain. Deep within Dominion space, hardliners plotted revenge. Rogue fleets gathered strength, and whispers of betrayal crept even within humanity's own ranks. The war was not over. It was about to become something far more dangerous. Humanity has revealed its power and forced the Dominion to the negotiating table. But new threats stir from both inside and outside as the fragile peace teeters on the edge. The conference chamber on Concordia was silent after the Vexari delegation departed. Silence but not peace. Ambassador Elias Wolf stood at the center of the empty hall, staring at the seat where Empress Shalek had sat just hours before. Her final words echoed in his mind. I will consider your demands. It wasn't a promise. It was a threat disguised as diplomacy. She's stalling, Admiral Okonkwo said from behind him. Her tone was clipped cold, buying time to regroup her fleets. Elias turned. Maybe, or maybe she's trying to control her own government. The hardliners won't accept these terms easily. Then she'll lose control, Okonkwo said, and we'll be at war again. The Admiral's face was carved from stone, all discipline and fury held in check. 3 years of retreat, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of pretending to lose, it had all led to this. And still, the finish line was not in sight. They won't risk open war again, Elias said, not with the Ghost Fleet in orbit. Don't underestimate pride, Okonkwo warned. Empires have burned themselves to ashes rather than admit defeat. Elias sighed. Then we'd better start preparing for the fire. The fire came sooner than either expected. 2 days after the negotiations, a coded transmission arrived from a distant sector, a human colony world called Aristia IV, deep in neutral space. The message was brief and brutal. Under attack, unknown fleet. Request immediate assistance. Elias and Okonkwo were on the bridge of the Resolute within minutes, watching sensor feeds stream in from scattered probes. What they saw made their blood run cold. A fleet, Vexari in design but lacking any official Dominion insignia, had entered Aristia's orbit. They were burning cities from space, just as they had at New Brisbane. Civilian transports were being shot down. Orbital platforms were being gutted. Black Banner Fleet, Okonkwo muttered. I've heard whispers, they're fanatics, refuse to accept the Empress's orders. So this isn't the Dominion? Elias asked. Oh, it's the Dominion, Okonkwo said grimly. Just not the part that's pretending to negotiate. Can we stop them? Only if we move now. Elias didn't hesitate, then launched the fleet. The Resolute and 5 dreadnoughts jumped into quantum space within the hour. Their target, Aristia IV. The transition tore through spacetime, collapsing light into a tunnel of distorted stars. Minutes later, they re-emerged, and the void erupted into chaos. The Black Banner fleet was massive, 24 warships, dozens of destroyers, hundreds of fighters. Smoke curled from the surface of Aristia, where cities burned like dying embers. "Status," Okonkwo barked. "Civilian casualties in the millions," Commander Park reported. "Local defenses destroyed, multiple distress beacons active." "Target their command ships," Okonkwo ordered. "Bring us within railgun range." The dreadnoughts roared to life. Their weapons spat slugs the size of trucks at a third the speed of light. The first salvo tore through 3 enemy cruisers before their shields could respond. The second gutted a carrier in a spray of molten metal. But the Black Banner ships were relentless. Plasma fire slammed into the Resolute's shields, painting the void in violet flame. "Shields at 72%, a technician shouted. "Hold the line," Okonkwo said. "No ship gets past us." Amid the storm of battle, Elias stood on the bridge's upper deck, watching the carnage unfold on the tactical display. Each blip was a ship. Each red flare was a death. "Admiral," he said quietly, "this isn't just a rogue fleet. Look at their weapons signatures, their power output." Okonkwo's eyes narrowed. "You're right, those aren't militia grade, they're military. Which means someone in the Dominion is arming them. Or supplying them directly." The implications were terrifying. If hardliners were funneling resources to the Black Banner, the fragile peace was already dying. "Focus fire on their flagship," Okonkwo ordered. "We end this here." The Black Banner flagship was a beast, a dreadnought stolen from a Dominion shipyard, bristling with plasma batteries and torpedo launchers. It dwarfed every other ship in its fleet. "Range 12,000 kilometers, Park reported. "Fire main batteries," Okonkwo said. The Resolute's railguns thundered. 3 tungsten rounds slammed into the enemy dreadnought's shields, shattering them like glass. Another salvo punched straight through its armor, ripping a hole the size of a small town through its hull. But the Black Banner wasn't finished. A concentrated barrage of plasma struck the Resolute's starboard side, collapsing its shields and scorching its plating. "Damage to decks 9 through 11, an officer yelled. "Fire's spreading." "Emergency containment," Okonkwo snapped. "We're not done yet." The dreadnoughts pressed the attack, unleashing missiles and particle beams. Fighters swarmed, darting between capital ships in a deadly dance. The void became a storm of light and fire. Finally, the Black Banner flagship cracked in half, a silent scream of twisted metal as its reactor went critical. The explosion consumed half its escort fleet in a blinding inferno. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Aristia's skies were clear and the Black Banner fleet was gone. But victory came with a price. "Casualties?" Elias asked. 17 ships damaged, Okonkwo said. 3 destroyed, over 1,000 dead. "And the colony?" 20 million civilians, she said quietly. "Half survived." Elias closed his eyes. It was better than New Brisbane, but not by much. Back on Concordia, the news hit like a gravity shock. Footage of the attack spread across human space. Burning cities, desperate transmissions, soldiers fighting in vacuum suits amid falling debris. It reignited old fury and old fears. In the Dominion, the reaction was even more explosive. Empress Shalak condemned the Black Banner as criminals and vowed to punish those responsible. But her words rang hollow. Many suspected the fleet had acted with the quiet blessing of certain military factions. "The cracks are widening," Tira said grimly, as she and Elias reviewed the situation in the diplomatic suite. "The Empress doesn't control all of the Dominion anymore." "She never did," Elias said. "She just pretended to. And now the pretense is breaking." He stared at the images of Aristia's ruins. "They think they can scare us back into submission." "They might," Tira said softly. "Humans have endured much, but this." "This," Elias interrupted, "will only harden us." The hardening was already underway. Earth's government passed emergency legislation to double ship production. New colonies were fortified. Old alliances, with the Thalzine and the Uri Syndicate, were rekindled. Species that had once watched from the sidelines now sent envoys, weapons, and technology. One by one, humanity's isolation ended. They're afraid, Okonkwo said as she read the reports. The galaxy is afraid, and fear is turning into respect. Or desperation, Elias replied. Some of these alliances are opportunistic. Their betting will win. Then we'd better make sure we do. But amid the unity, fractures grew. Commander Wolf, the traitor still held in a secure facility, became a rallying figure for extremist factions on Earth. They praised him as a patriot who had seen the truth, that only total war could guarantee survival. Demonstrations erupted in 3 major cities. Some called for the extermination of the Vexari. Others demanded vengeance for Aristia. The worst part, many of the protesters were veterans, survivors of burned colonies and shattered fleets. Their pain was real, their anger was justified, and their rage was dangerous. If this spreads, Tira warned, your own people may reject peace entirely. Elias stared at the protest feeds on the holo display. Then we'll have to convince them peace is still worth fighting for. A week later, a secure transmission arrived from an unlikely source. Velm, the Dominion's science advisor. Meet me alone. I have information that could end this war or start a worse one. The coordinates were for a remote outpost orbiting a dead star, far from any official patrol route. It's a trap, Okonkwo said flatly. Probably, Elias said, but if it's not, you're risking your life. And if I don't go, I might be risking billions. After a long silence, Okonkwo nodded. Take a stealth corvette, 1 escort, nothing more. Elias turned to Tira. I want you with me. She blinked me. You're the only one who can tell if Velm's telling the truth. Tira's crest shifted in uncertainty, but then she nodded. Then let's end this. They left under cover of darkness, their small ship slipping into quantum space like a ghost. The journey took 12 hours, 12 hours of silence, strategy, and unspoken fears. When they arrived, the outpost floated before them, a lonely structure orbiting the black heart of a dead star. No signals, no defenses, just darkness and quiet. Creepy, Tira murmured. Standard for peace talks, Elias said dryly. They docked, airlocks hissed, the doors slid open. And standing in the chamber beyond, alone and unarmed, was Velm. Ambassador Wolf, she said softly. We don't have much time. The Dominion is about to make a decision, one that will change everything. The Black Banner's brutal attack reignites the war's fury and fractures the fragile peace. As humanity gains allies, an urgent secret meeting could decide the fate of both species. The outpost was silent, ancient, and cold. No banners, no guards, no light but the faint glow of dying console screens. Elias Wolf and Turanesh stepped cautiously through its narrow corridors, weapons holstered but hands never far from the grips. The air smelled of dust and age, a forgotten place built before either of their species could walk upright. A fitting place, Elias thought grimly, for a conversation that could change the galaxy. Velm was waiting in the central chamber, alone, just as she had promised. The Dominion's science advisor looked older than when Elias had last seen her, the faint brightness of her scales dulled by exhaustion and something deeper. Fear, perhaps. You came, she said, her voice low and tired. Curiosity's a powerful thing, Elias replied. So is desperation. Both brought me here, Velm admitted, and both are the reason we're running out of time. Tira's golden eyes narrowed. You said the Dominion was about to make a decision. What kind? Velm gestured toward a nearby console. See for yourself. The screen flared to life, displaying lines of data, schematics, and strategic maps. At first, Elias didn't understand what he was looking at. Then the shapes resolved in his mind, orbital structures, power cores, weapon arrays larger than anything he had ever seen. That's a star cracker, he whispered. Velm nodded grimly. Project Inspire. It's still in prototype phase, but the design is viable. Once deployed, it can destabilize a star's fusion reaction from thousands of kilometers away. Elias felt cold all over. You're talking about destroying entire systems. Not destroying, Velm said softly. Sterilizing, every planet, every station, every ship wiped out in a single stellar implosion. The Empress doesn't want it used. But if she falls, the hardliners will. Tira's crest flattened. They wouldn't dare. Using such a weapon would unite every species in the galaxy against them. Velm's gaze was bleak. They believe that's already happening, and if they cannot win, they will burn everything they cannot hold. Silence filled the room. Only the faint hum of ancient systems broke it. How long do we have? Elias asked finally. 6 months, Velm said. Maybe less. They're already building the first prototype around a binary star system in the Zather expanse. Once complete, they can deploy it anywhere. Elias stared at the glowing schematics, his heart pounding. This wasn't just war anymore. It was extinction. Why are you telling us this? He asked. Because I don't want my people to become monsters, Velm said. And because I believe you don't want to annihilate us in return. There's still a chance to stop this before it begins. Tira stepped closer. How? Velm hesitated. By working together. The proposal was unthinkable. Velm laid it out carefully. A joint operation, human and Dominion forces, to infiltrate the Zather facility and destroy the Inspire project before it was completed. The Empress herself could not authorize it without triggering civil war, but a deniable strike carried out by a coalition could succeed. You're asking us to risk war on an even bigger scale, Elias said. If this goes wrong, everyone dies, Velm interrupted. Not just humans, not just Vexari, everyone. Elias turned to Tira. Her expression was unreadable, but he could see the storm behind her eyes. You believe her, he said quietly. I do, Tira replied. And so should you. My people have stories, ancient ones, about weapons like this. They always end the same way, no one survives. Elias exhaled slowly. If we do this, it has to be off the books. No official orders, no signatures, and if we're caught. We deny everything, Velm finished. I understand. Elias stared at the screen one last time, at the monstrous thing being built among the stars. Then he nodded. Then we do it. The operation was given a code name, Silent Dawn. It would be the most dangerous mission humanity had ever attempted, deeper than any previous infiltration, riskier than any known strike. It required a level of trust that neither side had ever offered before. 3 weeks later, the team assembled aboard the human stealth cruiser HDF Obsidian. 50 operatives, half human, half Vexari, trained together under the pretense of a deep space patrol. They learned each other's languages, tactics, and weapons. They argued, they distrusted, but slowly, grudgingly, they began to work as one. At the heart of the team were 3 figures, Elias Wolf, Turanesh, and Velm herself, now branded a traitor by her own government and wanted on charges of high treason. Are you ready for this? Elias asked her one night as they stood by the viewport, watching the stars slide past. Velm gave a faint, bitter smile. I spent my life designing things to protect my people. Maybe it's time I destroy one. And you, Tira? Elias asked. Her crest shifted slightly, a gesture he'd come to recognize as reluctant determination. I fight not for my people, she said, but for ours. The journey to the Zather expanse took 8 days. The region was a dead zone, a stretch of space scarred by ancient wars, littered with derelict stations and drifting wreckage. At its center burned a binary star, swirling in a slow, lethal dance. Orbiting those twin suns was the Inspire construction site. The scale was staggering. Dozens of kilometer-long modules floated in formation, connected by latticework beams and scaffolding. Shipyards hummed with activity. Hundreds of Dominion engineers moved like ants across the surface of the weapon's core. Intel confirms primary ignition array is 78% complete, Velm reported. Once they install the focusing lattice, they can fire a controlled pulse. How much damage could a test shot do? Elias asked. Enough to turn this entire system into plasma, she replied. The plan was simple, at least on paper. A small strike team would infiltrate the facility disguised as a Dominion supply crew, plant antimatter charges at 3 key points, and withdraw before detonation. If successful, the explosion would cripple the project beyond repair. If they failed, there would be no second chance. They launched under cover of a scheduled supply shipment. The Obsidian remained hidden behind a fragment of a shattered moon, cloaked in electromagnetic silence. Elias, Tira, Velm, and a squad of 12 operatives boarded a disguised transport vessel and approached the Inspire platform. Docking trajectory locked, the pilot said. No challenge codes so far. Let's hope that holds, Elias muttered. It didn't. Unidentified vessel, a voice barked over the comm. Transmit authorization sequence immediately. Velm's claws danced over the console, sending now. A tense moment passed, then. Authorization confirmed, proceed. The transport slid into one of the construction bays, docking with a hiss of metal and atmosphere. The doors opened, revealing a cavernous interior alive with machinery and workers. "This is it," Elias whispered. "Move fast, stay invisible." They split into 3 teams. Team 1, Elias and Tira, headed for the ignition core, a towering chamber lined with superconductive conduits. Team 2 targeted the magnetic containment field. Team 3 would sabotage the reactor coolant system to ensure catastrophic overload. Every corridor, every corner was a gamble. Vexari patrols moved constantly. Security drones hummed overhead. One wrong step and the entire mission would collapse. At the heart of the ignition core, Elias placed the first antimatter charge, a small, matte black cylinder no larger than his fist. It hummed softly as it armed itself. "1 down," he murmured, 2 to go. Tira's gaze was fixed on the core's central sphere, a pulsing, radiant structure that glowed with barely contained energy. "If this thing ever fires." "It won't," Elias said, "not if we do our job." Then everything went wrong. An alarm shrieked through the facility. Red lights flared. A voice barked over the intercom in harsh Vexari tones. "They know," Tira hissed. "Someone found Team 3. "Abort," Elias asked. She shook her head. "No time, we finish this." The corridor outside erupted with gunfire. Dominion troops swarmed in from every direction. Plasma bolts tore through bulkheads, sending sparks cascading through the air. Elias returned fire, dropping 2 soldiers with precise bursts. "We need an exit," he shouted. "This way," Tira yelled, pointing toward a maintenance shaft. They ran through corridors that shook with explosions, past startled engineers and smoking consoles. Every second brought more enemies, more fire, more chaos. "Charges armed," Velm's voice crackled over the comm. "But we're pinned near the coolant chamber. We won't make it to the transport." "Negative," Elias replied. "We're not leaving anyone behind. Fall back to Junction 7. We'll meet you there." The firefight that followed was brutal. Elias and Tira fought side by side, cutting through security squads and drones. Velm and her team reached the rendezvous point bloodied but alive. Together, they pushed toward the docking bay, their only hope of escape. But the bay doors were already closing. "They're sealing the station," Velm warned. "We'll be trapped." "Not if I blow them open," Elias said, pulling the detonator from his belt. Tira's eyes widened. "You'll trigger the charges now, we'll die." "Better that than letting Inspire live." "Wait," Velm shouted. "There's another way, a secondary service hatch on the lower deck. It leads to the launch grid. If we get there before the charges blow, we can escape." Elias hesitated, seconds ticking away. Then he nodded. "Lead the way." They ran through collapsing corridors as the antimatter countdown neared its end. The facility shuddered violently. Explosions ripped through the superstructure. Workers screamed. Alarms howled. 10 seconds, Velm shouted. "Go," Elias yelled. They dove through the service hatch, just as the world behind them erupted in white fire. The Inspire core imploded. Shockwaves ripped through the station, tearing it apart. Massive sections of the weapon tumbled into the binary stars below, vanishing into their blazing gravity wells. The mission had succeeded. But as the Obsidian jumped back into quantum space with its survivors, Velm's face was grim. "They'll know it was us," she said, "and they'll retaliate." "Let them," Elias said. "At least now they can't burn the galaxy down." Far away on the Vexari homeworld, Empress Shalak stood before a council in chaos. News of the Inspire's destruction had spread within hours. Hardliners screamed for vengeance. Moderates called for peace. The military demanded answers. But Shalak said nothing. She simply stared at the holoprojection of the ruined weapon and the encrypted message left behind. "We choose survival over annihilation. Now it's your turn." The Inspire project is destroyed, preventing galactic extinction, but the act has shattered what remains of trust. The Dominion teeters on the edge of civil war, and humanity braces for the retaliation to come. The galaxy held its breath. The destruction of Inspire sent shockwaves far beyond the Zathar expanse. Across Dominion space, hardliners howled for vengeance. Fleets mobilized. Propaganda screamed of human betrayal and terrorist cowardice. But others, quieter, older, wiser, saw something else. They saw a choice. Either continue down a path that led only to mutual extinction, or stop. And for the first time in generations, that question reached the very heart of the Dominion. On Earth, the news had a different effect. There was no cheering, no triumphant speeches, just silence, relief, and the heavy weight of what humanity had done. In secret, humanity and its allies began preparing for the inevitable retaliation. Every shipyard worked without rest, every fleet drilled for war. The Ghost Fleet, once a myth, doubled in size. And yet, Elias Wolf knew none of it might matter, because if the next war came, no one would survive it. 3 weeks later, a message arrived. It came through encrypted channels, bypassing every defense, every firewall. Only one person could have sent it. Meet me on Concordia. One last time, bring no fleet, no weapons, just truth. Empress Shalak. Admiral Okonkwo was furious. It's a trap, she said. They'll kill you the moment you step foot on that station. Maybe, Elias replied, or maybe this is the last chance we'll ever get. You've already done enough, she argued. We crippled their superweapon, we showed our strength, now we wait for them to come to us. They won't, Elias said, not if they think we're the same as them. She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. You're a madman. Probably, Elias said, smiling faintly, but a hopeful one. The ardent dawn approached Concordia without escorts, shields down, weapons cold. It was a leap of faith, the kind humanity had once believed itself incapable of. Tira was at Elias' side as they docked. Her crest was tense, her golden eyes scanning every shadow. If this goes wrong, she said quietly, we won't make it out. If this goes wrong, Elias replied, we were already dead. They stepped into the grand hall, the same ancient chamber where it had all begun months before. The same marble floor, the same towering windows, the same silent statues watching from above. And waiting there alone was Empress Shalak. She was dressed not in the ceremonial armor of a ruler, but in simple robes, the garb of a scholar, not a conqueror. When she turned to face Elias, her expression was unreadable. You destroyed Inspire, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. You risked war. It was already coming. You could have spoken to me. I tried, Elias said, but there are people in your government who won't listen, just like there are people in mine. Shalak studied him in silence. Then, to Elias' surprise, she gave a slow, weary nod. Perhaps you're right. Tira blinked. You agree. I do, Shalak said. The weapon was madness. It would have doomed us all. And yet, perhaps that was the point, to create something so terrible that no one would dare challenge us. And, Elias asked, and you challenged us anyway. Her gaze hardened. You reminded us that fear is not the same as respect. They walked together through the empty halls of Concordia. No guards, no cameras, no recording devices, just 3 people who in another life might have been friends. I have fought humans for 40 years, Shalak said quietly as they walked. I watched my son die in the Battle of Trelzar. I buried friends on worlds I cannot even name anymore. And yet, I look at you, Elias Wolf, and I see something I do not see in my own people. What's that? Hope, she said simply. You should have broken long ago, but you didn't. You endured, you adapted, you changed. And now you stand before me not as prey, not as a slave, but as an equal. Elias said nothing. There was nothing to say. Do you still want peace? Shalak asked at last. Yes, he said, more than ever. Even after Aristia, even after New Brisbane. Yes, Elias repeated, because the alternative is worse. Shalak stopped walking and turned to face him. Then let us end this. The negotiations that followed were unlike any in history. No aides, no translators, no armies waiting in orbit. Just 3 minds, human, Vexari, and something new, trying to craft a future neither side had ever truly believed possible. It took hours, days, weeks. There were arguments, of course. Fury, grief, memories too deep to ever fully heal. But slowly, piece by piece, a framework began to form. It would be called the Concordia Accords. It promised an end to hostilities. It guaranteed the sovereignty of human and Vexari space. It created a tribunal for war crimes, one that would try humans and Vexari alike. It established joint councils, shared research, and the first steps toward a defense coalition against future threats. It was, in short, a blueprint, fragile, imperfect, but real. And it was signed not by armies, not by governments, but by three names: Elias Wolf, Empress Shalik, Turanesh of the Scholar clans. News of the Accords spread like wildfire. Some called it a betrayal, others a miracle. Entire colonies erupted in celebration, others burned in protest. On both sides, extremists plotted sabotage, assassination, revolt. But the tide had shifted. The Dominion could no longer paint humanity as weak. Humanity could no longer paint the Dominion as monsters. For the first time, they saw each other as people. And once seen, that could never be unseen. On the day the Accords were ratified, Elias stood again on the observation deck of the Resolute. The stars looked different now, brighter somehow, closer. Tira joined him, her crest relaxed, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "It's over," she said. "No," Elias replied with a small smile. "It's just beginning." "You really believe this will hold?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's a start, and sometimes a start is enough." She was silent for a long time. Then quietly she said, "You've changed me, Elias Wolf." He looked at her surprised. "How?" "When I met you, I believed humans were dangerous, unpredictable, too emotional to ever be trusted. And now?" "Now," she said, "I believe you are dangerous, unpredictable, and too emotional to be trusted." She paused and smiled. "But I also believe you are capable of greatness." Elias laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." One last message arrived from Empress Shalik before the Resolute departed Concordia. It was short, handwritten, and it carried a weight beyond any treaty. "We stand now not as enemies, but as rivals who have chosen a higher path. May our children never know the wars we fought, and may they build something greater than either of us ever imagined." Elias read it twice, then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket. As the Resolute turned toward home, Earth rose on the forward display, a blue jewel against the endless black. Behind them, Dominion ships patrolled their own skis. No shots were fired. No threats were exchanged. Just silence. But it was a different silence now. Not the silence of fear. Not the silence before war. It was the silence of possibility. Years later, historians would call it the end of the Hidden War. They would write about the Ghost Fleet, the Black Banner, the fall of Inspire, and the signing of the Concordia Accords. But those who lived it knew better. The war had never truly been about fleets or weapons or stars. It had been about something far older. Something deeper. It had been about the choice to see an enemy as a person. The choice to forgive. The choice to hope. And on a quiet deck beneath an ocean of stars, a tired man named Elias Wolf allowed himself, for the first time in years, to believe that humanity's greatest battle might finally be won. Not with blood, not with fire, but with the courage to reach across the darkness and take a hand offered in peace. The Concordia Accords didn't erase the scars of war. They didn't bring back the dead or undo the pain. But they did prove something the galaxy had long forgotten: that humanity's strength was not its weapons, not its fleets, not even its stubborn will to survive. It was its capacity to change, to forgive, to dream, to fight not just for itself, but for a future worth sharing. And in a universe that had forgotten hope, that was the most dangerous weapon of all.